brush strokes, just bang, bang, bang. The colors are a little bit more impressionist, but too dark. Impressionists were much lighter in the blues and the greens. Also, you're beginning to see that weird kind of ghastly complexion, greenish color. He's portraying himself as an artist, though. Remember, Gauguin, if we didn't know Gauguin was an artist, you wouldn't guess that he was a painter. Here, Van Gogh is very clearly telling us, I'm a painter. The brush strokes, for instance, here, in Impressionism, remember how they were lighter, there were light strokes, and not this impasto. The impasto is when you use so much paint on your brush, or probably, this is probably what we call a palette knife, where you're actually, it's almost like something where you, like you do frosted cake with. You dip it in, and then you could smear it that way. Totally unlike anything in the Impressionist school. But again, everybody is trying to break those rules, because otherwise you're just copying an existing style. This is one of the last Van Gogh paintings. It's 1889. And as you probably know, he committed suicide. There is some minor dispute about that, a very minority view that he had bad relations with a couple of teenagers and that they killed him. But in general, everyone believes that he did commit suicide. The condition that he had, the medical condition that he had, was manic depression. And today we would treat that. It's a treatable condition, and often it's treated with a chemical called lithium. And it tends to tamp down the manic side and push up the depressed side. So I once said, you know, it's just too bad, because he killed himself very early, although he had 900 paintings, but he killed himself at a very young age. Isn't it too bad that he wasn't treated with lithium at the time? I don't know if they had lithium, but or some treatment. And a guy raised his hand and said, but if he'd had lithium, maybe he wouldn't have painted like Van Gogh, which is absolutely true. Artists, it's something in the inside that makes them do what they do, and if you screw up with the inside, you're going to get a different result. Van Gogh was very poor, could not afford paints, and so his brother, Theo Van Gogh, who was, he worked in a Dutch art gallery, but in France. Okay, so Theo would send Vincent his paints. Again, they weren't great paints, and we know that because when Vincent was painting, he often would send postcards that would literally have a little picture of what he was painting and then a description. And then for this one, it was, I'm painting one with a purple background. Well, that probably used to be purple. But because the paint quality was so poor, it's just faded over time. Same thing with this. I've always loved these white roses against the green. I just think it's just lovely. Well, if you get close, but not too close, you'll be able to see bits of red. Now, not a bright red, more like a barn brown red. And under the microscopes that they have in the curatorial department, they can see these were all red roses.
The whole rose?
The whole rose. Yeah, not just bits. They were this beautiful red color, but because again the paint was so poor in quality, the whole thing faded.
Is that a similar red that they use? Like, I know that's with the Italian backgrounds that look brown now. They used to be like a bright red. Is that the same reason?
No. The question was, in some of the Italian, they used a bright red background, but now it's faded. This was basically about that color. but so poor. Yeah, it's not that the white was painted over the red. It's the white was the red, and then the whole thing just pretty much disappeared. Yeah, it's absolutely huge in terms of the impact. But I think it's beautiful with just being white.
I think it's enough.
On the other hand, keep in mind, Van Gogh was a very studious painter. And if you were to get up what's called a color wheel, have you ever seen it? Looks like pie pieces. And this green is opposite, meaning complementary to this type of red. So as it was painted, he was painting these complementary colors. Complementary colors are very appealing to the eye. And obviously he knew that. He's a colorist, so he understood that and understood the, hopefully, market for that. However, having painted about 900 paintings, and in his lifetime he sold one. If that doesn't make you commit suicide when you're an artist, I don't know what would. After his death, Theo, the one who sent him the paints, Theo collected all of his paintings, and also he had about 1,000 drawings. So huge number, very prolific, even for a short span. Theo collected them with the idea, he had great faith that eventually his brother would be very famous. And so the idea was, in a couple of years, Theo would begin to ask museums, well, why don't you don't have to buy it, just hang it and let's see what it is. Same thing with galleries. Unfortunately, Theo died 6 months after Vincent died. So the heroine, and again it's a heroine, was actually Josephine, who was Theo's wife. So she continued with the Theo plan, and ultimately, not more than 10 years later, Van Gogh is just stratospherically popular.